In a toxic relationship, there is one single moment powerful enough to melt the shell of arrogance, making the narcissist tremble to their core. It is not the desperate tears you have shed, not the burst of rage that flared up, or even the pleas for reconciliation. What they fear most is precisely the quiet and firm turning point of the person who once loved them unconditionally. That is the moment the empath, who inherently possesses a vast heart, gives immeasurably, and forgives without limit, suddenly declares in their soul, "I have endured enough." That moment, dear friend, is absolutely not a sign of weakness or failure. It is the flame of awakening igniting from the ashes of exhaustion. Your eyes, once yearning for approval, now only gleam with incredible serenity. The hand that once clung tightly now releases gently, without the slightest tremor. It is at this very second that the narcissist's game of manipulation is completely overthrown, because they were never truly afraid of losing you. They only fear one thing: you finding your wholeness and absolute strength within yourself, without needing their confirmation or presence. When that self-awareness arrives, the entire illusory world they painstakingly built collapses into meaningless fragments amidst your own powerful silence. If you have experienced this moment of awakening, or are on the journey of reclaiming yourself, let's explore the hidden power within serenity and boundaries together. Please press like to affirm this shared empathy, and subscribe to the channel so we can walk together on the path of healing and rebuilding our inner strength. Now, let's delve into a truth that few dare to face. Kindness is not always salvation, and empathy is not always the answer. For the empath, if goodness is given without limits, it transforms into a self-imposed chain, and boundless empathy becomes a self-destructive trap. You, with your vast heart, believed that if you just loved enough, if you were just patient enough, the other person would change. But then, the moment of awakening arrives, bringing with it the bitter realization: authentic love does not demand the complete sacrifice of the self, and forgiveness never means allowing the repetition of old wounds. It is from this moment of self-awareness that everything changes dramatically. You no longer accept the role of being the emotional supply for the narcissist. Instead, you become the flame that nourishes yourself. This is not selfishness, but a return to your own source of energy. True strength is born not from the power of revenge, not to prove your rightness or wrongness, but from the power of self-mastery, a quiet authority strong enough to shake the entire illusory world of the manipulator. The empath begins the process of turning pain into power. They use those wounds, those bitter lessons, as fuel, not to burn others, but to rebuild a new version of themselves, stronger, clearer in judgment, and completely immune to manipulation. You realize that the narcissist can only exist as long as you react. Your silence is not surrender, but the draining of the energy that sustains their game. When you choose calm instead of trying to justify yourself, choosing stillness over engaging in endless arguments, they lose all power. The narcissist doesn't fear your anger or tears. In fact, they often relish those reactions because every time you react, it proves they still control your emotions. The only thing they truly fear is when you stop reacting altogether, when the eyes that once pleaded now become cold, when the heart that was once broken now finds rest in silence, not from despair, but from finally knowing its true worth. An empath who has awakened, who has decided enough, is no longer fragile. They use boundaries to guard their kindness, and self-respect to guide their love. You don't need to scream to prove your strength. All you need is to stand firm, unshaken, and unwilling to bow to any manipulation. Your inner peace is the loudest, most eloquent declaration of all. Following the realization that love cannot be an excuse for self-destruction, the empath begins to discover their most powerful weapon: conscious silence. Remember this clearly. The narcissist can only survive and thrive as long as they receive a reaction from you. They do not fear your screaming. They do not tremble at your accusations or reproaches. In fact, they often secretly relish those dramatic moments, because every reaction, even negative ones, is vivid proof that they still control the emotional strings attached to you. Every message you send to explain, every attempt to justify, or every time you seek to clarify the issue, are just bricks solidifying the emotional prison in which they hold you captive. The only thing that truly horrifies the narcissist is when you completely stop playing their game. When you choose absolute calm instead of trying to justify your actions, when you opt for stillness instead of descending into endless arguments, they lose their entire power supply. The empath's silence in this moment is not cowardice, nor is it acceptance of defeat. On the contrary, it is the ultimate victory of freedom, an act of withdrawing the energy that once sustained this entire toxic cycle. And this is where boundaries come into play. For the empath, setting boundaries initially can induce feelings of guilt, even feeling like a betrayal of their own giving nature. You have been accustomed to opening up, enduring, and sacrificing. But the truth is, boundaries are not walls of separation. Boundaries are maps that clearly indicate where you end and where others begin. They are the essential self-respect that you must grant yourself. When the empath learns to say no clearly and decisively for the first time, the narcissist will tremble. That short word resonates like thunder, shattering their illusion of boundless power. Because the word no carries a profound, unexplained meaning. You no longer have the right to define my worth or my limits. The narcissist needs emotional dependency. They do not need genuine love. They only need to know that you cannot live without them. They want you to cry. They want you to rage. They want you to feel lost, to beg, because all of that proves you are still trapped in their loop. But when the empath matures, when they stop waiting for external validation, when they realize kindness does not mean erasing all personal boundaries, the game officially ends. The narcissist cannot control someone whose emotions they can no longer unsettle. Silence at this point is not a wound. It is liberation. It is not an empty void, but fertile ground for rebirth. The empath in stillness is not a loser. They are the victor in the most important battle, the battle to reclaim themselves. They no longer need apologies to heal, nor do they need recognition to feel whole. They heal by returning to their authentic self, the self once obscured by manipulation but never extinguished. And when you withdraw your energy, cutting off the reaction, the narcissist falls into panic. Their entire illusion crumbles for one reason: you no longer care. Silence is not running away, it is a firm declaration. I am no longer playing this game. I choose peace. Once silence becomes the shield and boundaries are firmly established, that is when the power completely shifts, opening the door to the empath's deepest stage of transformation. The narcissist cannot survive without emotional dependency from others. They are energy vampires, living based on the feeling that you cannot exist without them. They crave to see you in a state of chaos, crying, raging, feeling lost, even begging, because all of these behaviors are undeniable proof that you are still deeply trapped in their cycle of manipulation. But then, the door of change opens when the empath reaches spiritual maturity. They stop desperately waiting for external validation, realizing the painful yet liberating truth. Kindness can never mean erasing personal boundaries. When this realization fully matures, the game ends decisively. When an empath decides to walk away, they do not do so in a burst of anger or with loud accusations. Their departure occurs in solid silence, a strategic stillness that is non-negotiable. It is not an end, but the beginning of a new phase, rebirth. This is a spectacular return, a return to self, to the inner voice once stifled by accusations and criticisms, a return to the dreams once abandoned, and most importantly, a return to the self-respect that was too easily given away. True victory is not making the narcissist regret their actions, not waiting for them to beg or change their ways. The greatest victory lies in your own inner peace. It is when you can look back at the painful past without trembling, without seeing the old tears. It is when you know an unshakable truth. Your inherent self-worth never depended on them and will never depend on anyone else but yourself. When the empath stands firm in this new version of themselves, the narcissist has nothing left to cling to. They may plead, they may pretend to change, they may launch their final tricks, but it all becomes meaningless. Because an empath who is truly done never goes back. You don't need revenge to prove your strength. Your very presence, calm, unmoved, and no longer manipulated, is the clearest proof that you have already won. You win not because you defeated someone, but because you chose yourself. Victory is not forcing them to change, but because you changed. Victory is not proving your worth to the world, but because you finally saw that worth within yourself. The thing the narcissist fears most is not that you leave them. What they fear is that you leave behind the version of yourself they once controlled, becoming someone they can never touch again. When the empath reaches their final limit, it is not a collapse, it is a birth. They no longer see themselves through the narcissist's distorted lens, no longer live in the shadow of manipulation. They begin to look in the mirror and see a person who has endured too much, forgiven too long, yet still stands tall. And in that very moment, they understand there is nothing left to prove. And it is in that very moment of birth, when the empath finally sees their inherent self-worth, that they grasp the ultimate truth. What the narcissist truly fears is not the departure, but the disappearance of the self they once controlled. The narcissist doesn't fear you leaving them. They have lost others before. What terrifies them most is that you leave behind the fragile, easily controlled version of yourself they once held, becoming a new person that their power can no longer touch. The awakening of the empath is not an overnight event. It is a long journey soaked in tears, self-doubt, and unanswered questions, until utter exhaustion becomes the flame of enlightenment. They look back and realize clearly, true love never demands endless sacrifice, and sensitivity is not a flaw, but a strength. When the empath walks away, not in chaos but in absolute calm, the narcissist experiences their greatest fear for the first time, the horror of becoming invisible. The empath's silence at this point is no longer resignation. It is a firm declaration. I will no longer play this game. In that stillness, every manipulative tactic becomes useless. The narcissist cannot argue with serenity, nor can they twist the truth when you no longer try to justify yourself. The empath learns a hard-won lesson. Boundaries are not cruelty or aloofness, but self-respect defended. They don't just escape control, they become the light guiding themselves, building a life based on conscious choice for peace, rather than based on the fear of abandonment. The final victory is not found in forcing the narcissist to kneel or confess, but in your inner peace. It is when you can sit in stillness and feel serenity. It is when you can look back at painful memories without trembling or shedding old tears. Victory is when you love yourself deeply enough, firmly enough, never to allow anyone, even the closest person, to cross the boundary that protects your integrity. When the empath reaches this state, they are no longer merely survivors of a toxic bond, but living symbols of strength, rebirth, and the power to rise from the ashes. Remember this. You don't need to seek closure from the narcissist. You have found the answer within your own healing journey. They acted that way because that is all they know. But you are different. You have chosen the path of freedom, dignity, and self-love. You are a soul that has matured through pain and risen stronger than ever. You no longer need an apology to heal, nor do you need validation to feel complete. And that simplicity, living, breathing, and walking with freedom in your heart is the ultimate power. You won not by fighting, but by leaving the battlefield. If you are hearing these words and see yourself in them, please believe, you are not alone. Millions of other empaths are walking this journey from darkness to light, from chaos to peace. If you only remember one thing today, let it be this. You are strong enough to let go. You are worthy of being loved the right way. And you are free enough to live a life unbound by anyone's control. This is the moment you begin to rewrite your own story. Walk with dignity. Choose peace over chaos. And choose the love that begins within you.